they'll be able to hear the prize. So I marked the research assignments and I was very happy. Great effort all around, lots of good information. People have done a nice bit of research, delved into topics. And so what we will do is take all of those, put them into a folder and put them onto Moodle so you can have a look at some of these as well. But also the creativity and the New Zealand humour works very well for me. And I had a lot of laugh out loud moments with your videos and your fact sheets. So thank you. And I gave out quite a few full marks because I was so happy with these. So well done. And then I also want to give out prizes, and I'm going to give out more prizes than I usually would for these assignments, Kez, because I was very happy. So speaking of audio tactile edgeline / rumble strips, Jennifer is a prize winner for the podcast on that. Actually a wonderful podcast voice, by the way. So I think there's a career change there if you ever want. So another one for Kaylee, and a second prize within that for Austin, the cameo appearance from the young Austin in the video on bikes at roundabouts, and having Austin ride through a few roundabouts to be filmed was, well, one roundabout, it was quite entertaining, and some good info and real live stuff. So that's a prize. Antol, for the video on traffic signals versus roundabouts. And what I particularly liked about that one was a sort of mini safe system assessment being done almost, but really thinking about crash forces and crash types, and explaining that well in quite a lot of detail. So that was sort of one of our technical content winner ones. We had Simon also with his super elevation information. So again, I thought the technical content on that one was really, really good, really sound and well put together. So there's another prize there. I'm not finished yet, Kez. I told you there's a lot. A few laugh out loud moment ones. So Claire, for the retro reflectivity fact sheet cartoon, and I'll leave it at, suggest you have a look at that one for the laugh out loud moment. I'll leave it there. Tama, for the trap lane TikTok, and we actually finally got one. I've said for a number of courses, and many courses now, somebody should do a TikTok, and we actually have one, and it's on TikTok. And it was funny and entertaining, and I again laughed, and it's about trap lanes. I loved that. And finally, Sean, for the barrier at curbs video, and that was it's just a beauty. Entertaining, actually gets the exact message across really succinctly, but so well put together. And there was a little acknowledgement to somebody at the end of that little video, so they might have to give two prizes there if that was a friend or a colleague or somebody that had helped put the content together on that. Now, as I say, I could have just given everybody a prize because such great effort, but I'm going to hold it there. Well done. Thank you for the effort, everybody. And as I say, we'll pop those into a folder so you can have a look at those and the others. And remember, the aim of this was to succinctly pop together some information on a variety of topics And so you can delve in, learn about one, but then also have a look at some really well put together stuff from your colleagues and get an insight. Okay. Now, is there a question that's come in there?
Yeah, I think there's a few questions here from Anatole that's hoping we cover at some point today. So having high friction road surfacing, textured markings, street lighting in all rural areas. Oh, sorry, I've gone halfway through. How far would you go with these recommendations in road safety audits is the question really. About having high friction road surfacing, textured markings, street lighting, roundabout at all intersections, etc., would improve safety. Do you think we should always suggest this?
It's a good question, and I suppose I'll broaden the question to, I mean, at every sort of location in New Zealand, we could spend millions and millions of dollars to improve safety, and we know we'd get some really, big risk reductions. We just there's just not enough funds available to do that. So what you have to do as an auditor is make a little bit of that judgment call yourself. It helps in the start of the audit when you're having that commencement meeting with your client, you're having those early looks at their project and the report and the context of the project and all of that. You get a feel for what they're doing. But I mean, you can take it to extremes. And if you're in a local road environment and you're looking at an intersection, for example, and as an auditor, you make recommendations for grade separation, flyover style stuff. I mean, it's just never going to happen. I mean, it's out of context, but also the cost is just so absolutely mammoth, right? So that's sort of your extreme example. But what the question being asked there is around when you get into those sort of grey areas. And all I can say is that it requires your judgment. Most of the time, things like signs and line improvements are low cost and somewhat effective, and are likely to be what you might, you'd likely be adding those if you think there's a deficiency there. Skid resistance is a bit of a harder one, and high friction road surfacing and the like. But for me, it's very hard as an auditor to gauge skid resistance. Usually, sometimes you can look at a road and you'd be suspicious, so in an audit, then I would probably just say undertake scrim testing or skid resistance testing, and I would just have that as a note, because I wouldn't be sure. I'm not going to do that as part of an audit. That's beyond the scope of what the auditor do, but you could flag that as a potential concern. But where I might point out high skid resistance surfacing as an option is, around a curve where I've got a particular concern about maybe motorcyclists, a real out of context curve, and we can't, or within the context of what they're doing, you go, well, they're not going to realign the road here and sort of get rid of this out of context curve. They're trying to do some minor safety improvements, and so skid resistance might be part of the package if I think that would help, as in a high friction surfacing or something like that. So I haven't really answered the question, and that's because it is really over to your judgment. And what you think is important and what is deficient and what would help. Okay, good question though, thank you. We already gave Anatoly a prize there, so for the wonderful assignment on signals versus roundabouts. So we won't give another prize for that question, but do keep your questions coming in. Now, Kez, today's a big session because a few reasons. I'm going to cover off 2 more road user groups, cyclists and motorcyclists. But I'm also going to give out the major assignment for this course, and that is the safe system audit, or at least the road safety audit component of a safe system audit. And everybody's going to get their individual sites local to them to go and look at, and we'll show you the template, what you have to fill out. So that's exciting. And I'm going to say this now, I'm going to say it at the end, and you're probably going to get an email about it. But the next session is a different Zoom link. Okay. The reason for that is you're all going to be in the room. It's not just going to be Kez and I, you're all going to be in the room, because we're going to do some interactive safe system auditing. And I'm going to, put you into some little breakout rooms with a design, and you can have a chat about it, and you're going to see what you can find, and we're going to come back together. So it's going to be a bit more interactive in the online session. But in order to do that, you need to use a different link. It's not the webinar link, it's a different link. And yeah, we are, we want to see how this goes. We reckon you're the group not to have anybody click on the link and go back into the webinar and actually get the new one. But we'll see if our 3 reminders will get you there. Anything else I need to cover, Kez, before I jump into some content?
No, nothing else. That's great.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's get into it. And of course, Kez is in the background monitoring the chat, so please pop anything you want in there. I'll be monitoring it as well. And we'll whip through our content. Of course, we'll have a break in about 45 minutes. Okay, so we talked about pedestrians last session as one particular road user group. We had been talking generally about passenger vehicles. We had Ferg in all his entertainment that Ferg brings, talking sort of heavy vehicles, predominantly around swept paths and the size of them turning and those sort of things. We didn't talk too much there about heavy vehicle rollover and some of those things. So it's a good assignment in there around heavy vehicles at roundabouts and rollover crashes. So you can have a look at that when you're in there and think about that. But we want to cover off cyclists and motorcyclists today. So we'll jump in with cyclists first. And one advantage we have usually for road safety auditors is that most auditors either ride a bike or have at some stage in their life ridden a bike. So that's a mode that they actually are used to. I suppose pedestrian, most auditors also are pedestrians. In fact, all auditors are pedestrians in one way or another. So that can be useful, and you can sort of gain some experience from that. But what I want to do, a bit like pedestrians, cover off what are some of the requirements for cyclists for safe travel, point you at some technical information. Then we get into common road safety audit issues, understanding basic cycling treatments and terminology. Now, a flag now that, there's so much that we could talk about in cycling infrastructure. We have another whole course on cycling infrastructure, and even in that one, which is all dedicated to that, we only feel we're covering a portion of what we could cover. So, just a few things to flag with cyclists from a road safety auditor's perspective. But some ways of thinking for cyclists is, we want separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, smooth surface or consistent surface. Speed maintenance, which is an interesting one, and I'll elaborate on that a bit. Connectivity and appropriate information. I like this statement, like auditors need to think like cyclists. And as I said, the advantage is that a lot of auditors are cyclists, or have been, so that ability to do that isn't too hard. But thinking, those questions like, would you feel safe using that road? What about if I turned here, would cars see me? Am I in a door zone if I rode there? But what cyclist and cyclist, or as a lot of people prefer to be termed, people who ride bikes, come in very varied forms. And it's probably the road user group that has the most variation in it, in the sense that we've got people like this. So we've got, you know, older people who ride, we've got young people who ride, but then we've got the lycra clad cyclists, we've got the training cyclists, we've got utility style cyclists, we've got people carrying cargo bike style cyclists. You know, it's a very varied group, which actually makes it quite hard to design infrastructure. But I sort of resort back to thinking about this 8 to 80-year-old, and that's a sort of design philosophy you may have heard of. You design your infrastructure for use by an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, and you really cover the bulk of your community. As I say, for cyclists, sometimes the 8 to 80 doesn't quite work with especially the lycra clad training style cyclists, but we'll get into that. Now, there is an abundance of guidance around cycling infrastructure. There's, within the auditing side of things, we've got Austroads Part 6 and Safe System Audit Guidelines. There's also this, it's getting a little bit old now, this Shared Path Audit Guidelines document that VicRoads produced, which I still like from a methodology perspective. I think they've done well there. We've got different infrastructure standards and guidelines from New Zealand, but also from around the world. And there's some really great documents in there. I've popped a few on there, some Auckland Transport stuff and some VicRoads stuff, City of Melbourne stuff, and the Crow manual, which is generally sort of seen as the cycling infrastructure design Bible. That's that document. And it's from the Netherlands. It's got all the, it's really great. Then there's some audit guidance from around the world, cycling road safety audit guideline prompt lists and things like that. So I think we've popped quite a few of these into the learning management system for you to access if you want and have a look at. It's not sort of necessary as part of this course to do that, but they're there if that's a passion of yours. And as I said, there's thousands of things out there that you could be out looking at. All right, straight into an audit finding that I see a bit these days. I say a bit. I don't see it a lot anymore. But longitudinal grades, and I think the picture has 1,000 words there, doesn't it? It's existing longitudinal grades where a cyclist who is riding to the left of the road a lot of the time encounters something like this or worse. Now, I say I don't see this that much anymore. And I certainly don't see it in designs anymore. I think the design community is fairly good at this. They bicycle-friendly grades if they need to do their drainage in this way. So we're in a good position there. But where I do see it is that a road upgrade is happening and there's existing longitudinal grades and there's no proposals to alter that, or existing roads and some are still there. We do sometimes see, for example, one that was very, I suppose, clear and important to find in an audit was that they were creating pop-up bike lanes or you know, sort of that tactical urbanism, but they took an area and sort of claimed it all for a new cyclist route to connect, which was, and used pop-up infrastructure for that. But the new route they took had a longitudinal grade right in there. Now, yeah, it's kind of obvious to see, but you've got to think that, well, cyclists will be going through there. Sometimes there'll be, you know, a few of them, so there might be people in front of them, so they're not being able to see the road ahead, or Maybe it's dark, it's foggy, it's raining, or they could be a little bit distracted as well for one reason or another, and it's a pretty immediate hazard. So I've done 2 expert witness cases, legal cases, against where people have been against a road controlling authority for longitudinal grade issues. And expert witnesses aren't on a side as such. They're just expert witnesses, just providing expert opinion. But in both cases, I was able to say, well, been running the road safety audit course for 20 years. And when I get to the section on cyclist safety, the first thing I talk about is longitudinal grades. It is 101 of road safety auditing for cyclists. And one of those cases involved a shopping centre that was doing some redevelopment. Part of the redevelopment had the building of bike storage facilities, signage off a bike path or a shared path to get to the shopping centre bike parking. So really encouraging cyclists to go a particular route, and there was a longitudinal grade. Actually, there were 4 longitudinal grades along that, because it sort of took them through their car park, which had these longitudinal grades, and a cyclist had in an evening gone down there and gone into it and seriously injured themselves. That was one. The other was for a local road control authority, local council, existing longitudinal grade that had been there for a while, and it really came out and played out to be a question around what is their practice for assessing risks on their road network, and how periodically are they looking at that, and are the people looking at that looking through the right lenses and the like. Anyway, you hopefully remember that one. I suppose this one's an interesting one from a few perspectives, but this is where there's a project, and it was adding bike sort of green paint, warning paint there, and some other features. It was providing bicycle storage boxes at the front. So the idea is that bikes can come up, they can store in front, they get a head start off, the drivers can see them. So they popped that on this one. But the way that these signals operate, it's a signalized intersection, is that when they run the vehicles out of Blythe Street, they actually put the left turn arrow on to let vehicles in, and they put the storage box in front there. So in theory, all these bikes can be storing here, and then there's a green arrow. So as a road safety audit team, we scratched our head about this. We said, well, this is wrong. Like, there's no if or buts about that. It's just wrong. Like, you shouldn't do that. But then we're like, well, what's the risk? Like, how do we come up with a risk rating on this? Because I think the idea that somebody would miss a cyclist if they're in that storage box it's not going to happen. I think, and just sort of plow them down. I think there's maybe some possibility of, drivers doing other maneuvers to get around, like driving around the cyclists that there. There's certainly road rage going to happen. Absolutely. Can I connect road rage to a road safety incident? Debatable. Anyway, so, we ended up, I think, rating it at a medium. In reality, it almost doesn't matter what we rated that. It was going to get changed. But we do like to sort of, have a think about that. Okay, couple of questions that come in there. So one's about where are those cycling reference documents? So we'll have a look at that, and we will let you know. I might do that at the break just to see if they're in there, or they need to yet be uploaded, or they may even be just hidden from you at this stage. So sorry about that if they're not immediately obvious. How is it intended cyclist right turn from Sydney Road to Blythe Street? Yeah, great question. So that's often a challenge on how you do that. So in this case, yeah, they either would need to navigate their way into the middle of the road to turn right, or say cross at some sort of pedestrian facility and make their way there to turn like a car. Essentially, it's a little bit hard to, like, you'd also potentially put a hook turn facility in there so that cyclists could come off and then get a free run down there, which is a much nicer way to do it. Yeah, so no stop box for them. Yeah, well, that's a bit of the same issue. We'd actually wouldn't want cyclists out here because of they would then be sort of trying to get over there when other cars are coming up here, and it's a bit of a mess. Okay. Okay, lots of comments coming in, but while I have a look at the comments, I'm going to give you a little quiz, and this is, you're looking now as a road safety auditor, existing conditions on a bike path facility. There it is. I'll give a prize out for the person who can tell me what country this is in, and then I want you to pop in any issues you see as a road safety auditor. Okay. In the UK, yes, and it's Wales. Yep. So, Kez, I'll let you work out prizes on that one. You been to Wales, Kez?
Yep, many times. Yep.
Yeah. Do you speak Welsh?
No.
What does that translate to?
I haven't got it. Well, obviously, cyclist dismount. Obviously,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Your Welsh is great. It's perfect. yeah. All right. Okay. So let me just read that other thing first. Left turn could be an issue with heavy vehicle. Yeah, that's a good point there, Hugo. Well done. Okay. So what do we see? People, well, gee, we've got the eagle-eyed audit team on this again. So sight lines being blocked by the fence. Well done. The great Abraham has picked that one. Longitudinal, great. Just been talking about it, hadn't I? Prize there, I think, Kez. And that's it's a good example, isn't it? It's actually not a longitudinal grate for the bikes going on the road, but right in our cycle facility, it's a longitudinal grate. So yeah, fence, visual, fence, lots of that. It's good. You'd want to go look at the road from the other direction just to see who has priority and how clear all that is. Yeah, lots of stuff on the fence, blocking sight lines. Yep. Wow, good. Just reading through them as they come. Well, I like Ben's comment there. He's already thinking about maybe at night that would look like it is sort of cyclists' priority through and the see-through effect. So that's a really good one. You would want to have a look at that at night. Absolutely. Well done. So thank you, everybody. Really good comments there. And, one thing I often say is, okay, we've got a sightline issue here, and it was really immediately picked up by a lot of you, and that's good. So cyclist approaches this, they don't have sight distance. Vehicles don't have sight lines to cyclists approaching this. We've got a cyclist dismount sign, don't we? So, that's, of course, cyclists will stop and dismount and walk across the road. Well, they will not, absolutely not. And this is where auditors again provide this important role of just common sense, right? So somebody's put that up and it does not alleviate the issue. In fact, cyclist dismount signs for me are just the most useless sign we can put on our network. Like, cyclists don't dismount. Yeah, this picture to me is the height of ridiculousness, where we see, you know, every crossing point cyclist dismount sign. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a waste of everybody's time and effort. Actually, for me, as a road safety auditor, the cyclist dismount sign is just the designers and traffic engineers doing my job for me. They're just pointing out issues. There's got to be a fundamental issue there, and you're able to do it. This is another UK example. So we want to deal with the fundamentals of the issue, and really, yeah, auditors are the voice of common sense. Let me give you another example here. This has a few stories to go with it, a few learnings, but the background on this audit, so the team and I were having a look at it, and it was a big new subdivision, and the local council asked us to come up and do a post-opening road safety audit. Now, amongst the range of findings, but one of them was that they decided to put a shared path, or they had the sidewalk and footpath as a shared path, and it ran right up next to the fences. And so there was a number of locations around this subdivision where we had the garage here, and we had a high fence, and we had the cycle path here. And of course, we're blocking the sight lines for vehicles exiting and entering their driveways. So we made, you know, the recommendations, consider measures to open sight lines, you know, removing the first panels, reducing the height, and the like. So sort of, you know, cut downs here, or removing that whole panel, and, you know, back to that earlier question about, you know, what do you recommend? Well, you know, we were sort of focused on that. We could have said, you know, take the whole shared path and move it out there. But that's just such a massive, like, huge dollar investment for something that's already there, it's built. That really, we feel that change would just never happen. That wasn't even recommended, wasn't even put out there. The really challenging thing was associated with this being a development and a private property, and it had already been approved. So this is where the story gets interesting on this one. We handed this report in, had, you know, however many findings it was, and they came back and they said, yeah, thanks for this all, happy to do that. And they said, can you please reissue the report without this, because that's been approved, that's part of the structure plan, or, you know, subdivision guidelines was already approved, it's on private land, and, you know, there's nothing that can be done. We don't want it in the report. And this is where you get into these interesting battles as a road safety audit team. But we said, appreciate that, and that's a challenge. We are leaving that in our report because it's a road safety issue, and we, you know, are concerned with it, and you know, we can try to help you navigate through this, but it's an issue. You know, just because it's very inconvenient and very challenging for you to address it, it doesn't make it not an issue. Anyway, so it did cause them a lot of headaches, a lot of concern. They had changes to their subdivision guidance design guidance that they navigated through. I think they managed to work with the developer and the private properties to get changes to a lot of these, which I think they had to pay for. Haven't ever had any road safety audits for that local government since, but that's part of what has to be. You have to stick to your guns a little bit sometimes as a road safety audit. Okay. Few other things. Now, surface deficiencies, pit lids, grates, and these sort of things, they present that immediate hazard of hitting it as a cyclist. But another thing to be aware of as a road safety auditor is the way that cyclists will change their riding line to avoid things, and does that push them into dangerous areas? A couple of other ones. You'll see this come up quite a bit as a road safety auditor. You've got an intersection and the lanes don't line up. So you can see here that the straight sort of lines up with the footpath. This lane lines up with that lane, and it's a bit of a mess, isn't it? This happens quite a bit when you've got a new leg put on an intersection sometimes, and bits and pieces. Back in the day, you used to see auditors and design teams sort of looking down a plan like that to try and see how everything lines up and these sorts of things. Now you can sort of just draw straight lines on your PDFs or CADs. Now, this is going to cause side swipe crashes in here between vehicles, but it gets really messy then when you put a cyclist coming through there as well, and we see lots of issues, and the cyclists being more vulnerable are subject to trouble there. So, hard one to make meaningful recommendations. There's immediate recommendations that you can do with RPMs, and note these ones are RPMs, not RRPMs. So they're raised pavement markers, not raised reflective pavement markers. So they're just the domed ones to provide that specific line of travel. There are more expensive options of providing bike facilities that are, that go off and then come back on and enter back in. You can do different phasing of the signals with head starts for bikes. So there are some things to be done. It is a bit challenging though. A similar sort of challenge often where you've got cars and you've got cyclists who sort of come up here and cars coming up here. Now the cars are focused on trying to merge in and accelerate out, and so sometimes there's just a bit of turbulence and conflict involving cyclists at these locations. Roundabouts and cyclists, very interesting topic, and one where we got a very nice video and a prize-winning assignment, so you'll be able to have a look at that. But in terms of design of roundabouts to try to better cater for cyclists, because cyclists are overrepresented in crashes and roundabouts. Roundabouts are wonderful for passenger vehicle crashes, but we have had some trouble. So the old design guidance, the old one was, and the old thinking was to say, hey, let's get this cyclist as far away as we possibly can from the traffic that's going through. And that was pretty quickly discovered. Well, it wasn't pretty quickly discovered. It was discovered that that's causes more safety issues than it does improvements in safety because of two things. One is that we get vehicles trying to, overtake or pass the cyclist in a narrow area, and we get crashes associated with that. The second one is a bit more nuanced, and it's a bit more sort of having to understand human factors a little bit and the like. And it is an absolute fascination of behavioral psychologists or part of the behavioral psychologist community. A vehicle approaching here looks out this way, right? And it's got a look but fail to see crash, where a bike is coming up here and there's no sightline impediments, and the car can absolutely see where the cyclist is and that they're coming, but looks and then continues on and hits the cyclist. And it's not intentional. And it's called look but fail to see, or look but did not see. And you can Google that. That's the phenomenon. And the behavioral psychologists just love, they just go to town on this. So they talk about, so one of the things is positioning. It's out of position. They're approaching to look for something that's in this. So positioning is one. They talk about threat theory and the like as well. And Gary's making a comment about the A pillar. So that, that can play into it from where the what the car can see and a visual impediment inside the vehicle. But yeah, look but fail to see pops up a lot. But it was discovered that, if the cyclist was more central, there's less of this look but fail to see type crash occurring. Doesn't eliminate it. What's the phenomenon called again? Yeah, looked but failed to see, or looked but did not see. So Ostrodes then meant, and design guidance went to this idea of putting cyclists into the lane, to claim the lane. And that means that people can't squeeze by them or try to squeeze by them, and they can't, and it's a better chance of eliminating the look but fail to see. So it's then marked with these things. Prize for the person who tells me the name of that little doohickey. Sharrow, Simon's on that first. Lots of people doing it. So it's like a combination of the word shared and arrow, saying that this is a shared space between cyclists and vehicles. So that's the design guidance for these low speed single lane roundabouts. I'll show you shortly what an even better solution is for this, if you can. Two-lane roundabouts been very hard for a long time because you certainly can't be sort of pushing a cyclist to claim the lane in these environments because of the fact that there's other lanes nearby. We have swept path of large vehicles. We have an inherent dynamic visual obstruction issue that often pops up with vehicles here. So really complex. There are options to sort of think about, exiting your cyclist out of the circulating carriageway early, providing separated facilities. Here's some mock-ups. The Dutch, they're sort of the general world leaders in all of this, and they would never, they would have possibly something like this, and these would be underpasses. They would never try to mix a cyclist or a two-lane roundabout like that. But here's sort of a demonstration of a single lane urban roundabout best practice, and it's to create what is called a Dutch style roundabout, where you have a circulating priority cycle lane around the circulating carriageway for vehicles, and so a cyclist comes in, and if I want to do a right turn, they go sort of around and off they go. They're separated, they have priority. So that one's built. There's an example of it in Melbourne. It works really well. We did an evaluation of this. Lots of good, really good compliance and from vehicles. Most cyclists use the facility. 88% use the facility. So that's exciting. There's questions coming. Any examples of this in New Zealand? I'm not aware of any. I know there's been interest and people looking at it, but if anybody does know of any Dutch style protected roundabouts, we call them, pop it into the chat. And of course, we can you know, as auditors, we're thinking about cyclists. Here's a really interesting one where cyclists have a sort of protected approach, and then the design was to add this thing, and the idea being that the cyclists would come up here, so they'd go through there, they have this little spot to pause and go, and it should break up the journey. We scratched our head for a long time at this design as an audit team, and and liked the theory. We got quite worried about vehicles turning and cyclists storing and propping. So that was a big concern, especially with volume of large vehicles and the tracking and those sorts of things. So that was a concern. Funnily enough, one of our designers called that the mammal pouch. And mammal is an acronym that's used as middle-aged men in lycra. And it's quite a popular sort of training route here. And that played into it a bit, because the mammals, the middle-aged men in lycra, I have to put my hand up, I'm a mammal. I get out for the training rides as well. But it happened often in packs. So it's kind of useless for that sense, because you could really only store one in there anyway. Another little example here, so I'm just chucking in a few examples before we have our coffee break. Here was a design, and it kind of looked really good. This is probably an example of where that audit at design stage and then a pre-opening, post-opening audit is a good thing. So you got a cycle, we got a sort of cycle facility / shoulder, and then they've got a separated cycle facility here. So you can see this is dedicated to cyclists, and you've got your cyclists only sign. And you think, okay, great. They're sort of taking the cyclists off the roundabout. That's a nice run for them, and they're not going to get caught up in all of that. And so look at that and you go, great, okay, that's good. And then they built it, and you go to do the post-opening audit, and okay, you sort of go, okay, that's kind of confusing. Like, as a cyclist, I would ride up to this and I go, oh, it's a footpath. I can't go up there. And I now just battle it out in the roundabout with all the vehicles. It's a little cyclist only sign. I might miss that amongst looking at all of this, what's coming up and everything like that. But, you know, these are the things where you can, as a post-opening, you know, there might be the ability to create, to just do like a little bit of green paint like that would have almost like solved it, because it really draws you up there as a cyclist, doesn't it? And that's what that whole facility was built for. As sort of examples of using green paint for that encouragement of cyclists in a specific direction. Green paint was originally proposed to, or originally used, and it's sort of like its core purpose was conflict point. So where a car could conflict a cyclist, you painted that area green, so a driver approaching is more alert to look for cyclists. Green started then to be used to a bit of an encouragement tool and a bit of guiding tool. And of course, that's green in some countries, it's blue in some countries, it's red in some countries, a bit of color confusion going on out there. Now, there's a lot happening in the chat here, which is good. I don't think there's anything for me to deal with. Yeah, good point about cyclists complaining about the green paint being slippery. And that is it's certainly an issue. Cyclists and motorcyclists, and we don't want to excessively use paint. And certainly if we do, there are sort of high skid resistance ways to create green. So omni-grip style, calcium bauxite style treatments. Dooring's an issue that, you know, it's always been there, but it got that label as dooring in the past sort of 10 or so years, and this is where, you know, driver opens their door in front of a cyclist, and we see serious injuries and injuries of the cyclist hitting the door. Most of the fatalities that have occurred around Australia and New Zealand associated with cyclists avoiding or hitting the door and falling into the traffic lane and then being struck or run over. And so it's very hard sometimes to, you know, create meaningful solutions to this without major infrastructure changes and whole cross-section changes. These areas are particularly problematic when you have clearways. So this parking at some periods of the day is that this whole thing's a running lane. And so if you were to really, you know, a lot of marking of this area, well, some of the day that's right sort of in the middle of the lane, and so it doesn't really make too much sense. And then, you know, even when you can mark it, we see, you know, it's marking close to the doors, so that becomes pretty problematic. That's a fatality site there of a dooring incident. But there are lots of good examples now around of what we are seeing as, or we're considering best practice associated with, you know, cycle facilities, which is your Copenhagen style lanes, where you have bikes and you push your parking out into the road. You have a buffered area for the door, for passenger door, and yeah, great, really nice example down here in Christchurch, so you know, and yeah, lots of that going on. Now, interesting to do the road safety audit of sorry, I'm going to go back. These facilities, they do wonderful things, and then they do increase some risks. Sight lines in entering and exiting cause some trouble. Pedestrians crossing cause some challenges. Jenny's popped in there a mention of the Dutch reach, which is a good behavioural technique to try to get drivers and passengers to open their door using their hand not closest to the door, so it forces them to look back. And I think that's, you know, that sort of stuff's great supplementary. If you can build this, you're sort of eliminating the need to try to get everybody to do that, which we'd love everybody to do that. We just know that it's there's a challenge there. The idea of cyclist pedestrian priority is a big thing now, and we see a lot of cycleways getting priority, and this is really good. You know, here is examples of shared path facilities that take priority over the road, and there's some really intricate details around calculating sight distances associated with this. I just don't have time in this session to run you through that. If somebody's grappling with that, I can send you lots of information about it, because you're trying to think about approach speed of cyclists, vehicles, and then you've got, you know, thinking about which of the sight distance formulas would you use. Are you doing gap sight distance? Are you doing stopping sight distance? And yeah, there's a bit to think about there. But these are really good from a safety perspective, and also from a, you know, encouraging active transport perspective as well. Interesting with this one, and I popped something onto LinkedIn, one of our Safe System snippets a while back, of this actual route, because you go through this facility, it's beautiful, works superbly well, cars give way to you. Go through the next intersection, it's the same, and then the next intersection you get to kind of looks a bit like this, but the priority is the other way around. And you just sit there and watch all of the cyclists just go through with priority in the cars, and you know, you just want that consistency along a route. I better keep moving on. I think this is a really elegant way to do local area traffic management considering cyclists. Again, as an auditor, one of the things you get a local area traffic management scheme, maybe do an audit of, and it's really, good because it's slowing vehicles down and you're getting all those benefits. But sometimes you're squeezing cyclists in with cars. So you're putting roundabouts in, you're putting chicanes, these one-way slow points, and you ask the cyclists to squeeze in and compete with the cars. But this is kind of elegant because you provide that cyclist bypass facility. So that, yes, the cars are sort of battling it out on that one-way slow point. Okay, they slow down. Who's gonna go? And it's a really great slow point. But you've taken the cyclists away from that whole mess. So I think that's a good way to do it. Shared path audit guidelines I mentioned. I think that's a good document. When you're doing a cycling facility or a shared path, you're certainly going to ride through it as an auditor. There I'm out there, and just practically what would we take when we're doing cycling audits? Well, you sort of video the whole thing, dash cam there. Take an electronic level, which is a bit awkward to carry. That's to look at the grades of the cycle path, and I also use it as a measure as well, the height of any facilities to go through, and yeah, that pretty much does it. That camera, like the dash cam, is a good one, as you can use that to grab photos, but it also takes photos as well, and GPS tags them, so you can drop them on a map and place all your issues and things as well. So a number of sort of common things you find in these: path widths, obstacles, hazards, horizontal and vertical alignment, surface issues, intersections. So here's one. So again, like, who's got priority at this point in the shared path? It's just not clear, is it? And yeah, if it's busy, it might just cause a few little bits of confusion. So some path-to-path intersection guidance, which kind of looks like just normal vehicle intersection guidance as well, isn't it? Their priorities, good sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance, 90-degree, and that's to improve sight and reduce speeds. There's another example actually, and this one is actually kind of confusing because the actual path priority is for that one, but as you look at it on the ground, it looks like it's that one. So there is that confusion, and you actually have cyclists coming through on the main path and going quite fast. And so if you had a cyclist coming down here, a kid coming down here, or whatever it is, it really doesn't help from that perspective. Drop-offs, certainly an issue. Even smaller drop-offs, that'll definitely destabilize bikes. And you've got to think, on these shared paths, there's dogs and there's kids and all sorts of things. So cyclists moving along at even just medium pace, not really belting along, and a dog sort of jumps out there, they can go into that and lose control. And right side hazards, I suppose, the different hazards in there. And cycle facilities often and bike paths are often in flood prone areas because it's land that they don't want to build on. So and so we do see these times when there's lots of mud and debris and things. And the fencing, well, there's very good now guidance on particular cyclist fences. And so as an auditor, again, you might pick up a fence like this and say, well, that if a cyclist, comes close to that, I'll catch pedal or a handlebar, and that they'll come off, and that a cyclist-friendly fence should be used. So something along those lines. Where's guidance on cyclist-friendly fences? I'm pretty sure there's an Australian standard, Australian and New Zealand standard on cyclist-friendly fences, but I might have to look into that and grab it. Certainly, just the availability of cyclist-friendly fences is there, but you're right. You want to go, okay, well, which one of these is actually cyclist-friendly? Just taking a note there. A lot of shared paths are close to roads, and people are then saying, well, we want to put a barrier system to protect the path users from any vehicles that leave the road. So they're thinking about safety, and then you start to see some implementations like this, and that's good from that perspective. The vehicles won't get to cyclists and walkers. However, we have the back of the W-beam system there. So if a cyclist deviates out, they'll hit that, and we have seen some serious injuries for cyclists, and local governments being held responsible for that because that we're putting hazards in for the cyclists. So you can do back-to-back W-beam systems, and that certainly protects against some of that issue. A good question came in there. Okay, the deflection area of the barrier. So that certainly is something to consider as well. These are the old, what I would call a Type B or a G4 system. So they won't deflect as much as a flexible W-beam, but if you are using flexible W-beams, you'd want to think about that as well and try to get a bit of that buffer area. Again, a road safety auditor can provide a bit of assistance with that to a designer, because often you're so constrained in how much space you've got there, and you're going, well, if I provide all this buffer area, which is the deflection area, I lose lane width for the cyclists and pedestrians because I can't get into the property, and they're trying to balance that out. So as a road safety auditor, that's where you probably consult with people who are real barrier experts, and they're talking to you about the way that the barrier works and how far it deflects. But then all of the things you can do to aid that. So then you can tighten up post spacing to reduce deflection. You can understand that deflection is only at a specific point in time and at a specific direct angle of departure of a vehicle at a specific speed. And actually our test scenarios are very rare that they would ever happen on the road, and especially not in urban areas. So you can really, with a good understanding of barrier and barrier mechanics, you can be really helpful to the design team. Yeah, and a good comment in there about, well, what are the chances of that specific maximum deflection and a barrier being right there? Last couple of things before we take our break. This is, the idea of putting hazards in a bike path to stop vehicles getting into areas is, it is always seen as, you're really creating a hazard for potential cyclists. The chain is a real just, kick in the teeth for a cyclist, because at night you're not going to see that. Somebody's tied a bag to it to try to warn other cyclists, I suspect, or say, we don't. That's not how you do that anymore. There's these sort of ones are quite interesting, where you've got, this is actually, I think, pretty good practice. So the cable stay is in the middle of the bike facility. Ideal would be not to have the cable stay in the middle of the bike facility. But if you absolutely have to and you can't do anything about it, I think they've done pretty well. They've line marked it. They've got pre-warning. They got flexible bollards. These are flexible, and I think that's a pretty good outcome. So we talked a little bit about thematic audits, the theme. So cyclist audit, you're getting out there on your bike and you're looking for all your things, your facilities, and there's a fact sheet in Moodle that you can have a look at. I have a few little tips there. I'm not going to do the quiz because I've already gone over time on cyclists, but I'm going to give you a little break now. Let's take just 3 or 4 minutes. We'll go 3 minutes, so it's a quick run and fill the coffee up break, and we'll get back into it. I'll have a read of any questions in the break. So back in 3 minutes. Oh, now, are you seeing my screen? Or? No.
I'm seeing you.
Oh, well, that's good. Okay, I better find where is that going? Ah, I see what's happening here.
Oh, there we go. It's back.
Okay. Motorcycles. Okay. There's a lot of similarity in some of the ways of thinking about issues for motorcyclists as there are for cyclists because of the two wheels, but there's lots and lots of differences as well. So I'll have a bit of a chat about that. I do have a couple of videos which I'm not going to play. Actually, I'm just trying to get one ready. That off the screen. Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Sorry, I'm just teeing that up. So again, same stuff. But different road user. What are the requirements? Where's the technical information we can get? What are some of the common road safety audit issues and the terminology? Motorcyclists are our most overrepresented vehicle out there on the outer road network. It like 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured per kilometre travelled than a passenger vehicle. That's astronomically large, and there's the inherent vulnerability, there's the inherent instability, there's the all of these just inherent dangers of riding a motorbike. And like any road user, there are people who do it inappropriately, and there are people who do it appropriately. So back about 20 years ago, we developed the first Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly Guide, which is a direct look at motorcycle infrastructure, road infrastructure and its impact on motorcycle safety risk. So it's more than just the rub rail on barriers. It's generally looking at all of our road design characteristics and features and where we operate and design roads and which characteristics are more influential for motorcycle risk than other risks. So those documents are now available, and the one we originally did is now being used across New Zealand and different parts of Australia, and some Europeans have sort of taken that on as well. And have an eagle eye for Wally in these slides. So I talk about the 5 S's of motorcycle safety as an auditor. We want to think about sight, surface, signs, strike being, what's a rider going to hit if they come off, and speed. And if we just, allocate those to the probability of a crash and the consequence, or the likelihood and the severity, we see that the sight, surface, signs are around the chance of a crash. The strike is around the severity of the crash, or the consequence of the crash, and the speed is both. So let's talk about sight first. So a motorcycle is obviously smaller than even small cars, and thus are hidden behind objects that we may not consider sightline impediments traditionally. Here's some interesting measurements for you, just of interest. Actually, I'll give a prize. Why we got this? Sorry, that's still the same Wally. Don't count more Wallies. I wish we accidentally went back. Why have we got a safety margin there? What's that for? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, clearance is good, but it's the lean that Simon's put in there is really it. And I mean, maybe Julian was on that with thinking about that as clearance, but you know, you got to factor in that lean. That's how riders get around curves and corners with that lean. So that's what's in there for. Now back to, you know, the size, just a picture to demonstrate that very small sign blocking, you know, half of a motorcycle there. So riders also need to be able to see what's coming up, to adjust and position themselves as all vehicles do. It's just that riders are more susceptible to these unexpected circumstances. So really good advanced warning sign is good. And if there's something unexpected coming up, you certainly want to be really good at signing that. Ideally, you remove what's unexpected, but if you can't. This is a particular sign that was sort of invented recently for the specific scenario where a curve tightens up. So curve tightens, and that's sort of how that sign looks. I'll give a prize if somebody can tell me what the technical name for a curve that tightens up is. So you've got one radius. Oh, look at that. They're coming in nicely. Quinton, prize compound curve. You've got one radius there, and then it tightens up. Now, you've probably driven one, and in your time, or lots of them, and it's sort of, you're driving along, and then you get, you go, that was a bit sharper. Well, the riders on that, they don't have that luxury of, you know, vehicle, those extra wheels and stability, and they end up on the wrong side of the road or into the roadside if it goes the other way. And here's just a real world example. You've got a 252 radius curve into a 117 radius curve, so that tightens up. And this is the side of 4 motorcycle runoff road outside of curve crashes. It has a compounding factor of an unsealed road entering a sealed road, which means gravel wash will be in that area as well. But it's, you know, it's an interesting one. Sightline challenges again. So you've got one vehicle turning from here, and you've got one vehicle approaching from here, and you've got queued traffic from a set of traffic signals. Motorcyclists could be either, but which one do you think is more often motorcyclists, 1 or 2? Yes, 2. Look at that, coming through beautifully. Hugo can have a prize. He was the first one to say 2, and 2's right. Just because motorcyclists are easier hidden behind these vehicles. And so some sort of minor, you can do major things to address this with, you know, signalizing this bit of intersection and connecting with the other signals. So, you know, you can ideally get rid of the keep clear, but that your traffic ops people might have some issues with that. You could raise this area to slow down. You could even just simply pull back the hold line of the keep clear to open up better sight lines. Massive keep clear, this one, isn't it? Why have they got that? Anyway. Yeah, common issue for cyclists in bike lanes, and vehicle to vehicle crashes happen all the time associated with this, but that extra protection and of the vehicle to vehicle means there's far less serious injuries associated with these crashes for other vehicles. Actually, that's that site on the ground, just to give you an indication there. The Pajero here is, you know, turning. You've got a truck there. They're never going to see that motorcyclist coming through. And motorcyclists, as I said, get hidden behind smaller things. There's one just hiding behind the tree. And you might think, they're off the front of the pack early. And so we would like as clear sight lines as we possibly can. It's hard in some situations, I know. But things like thinking about the positioning of signal controller boxes, small landscaping bits and pieces, your signage, where signage is all important. So surface, and we did have that question about line marking earlier. Motorcyclists and cyclists, to a degree, take this lean to get around curves and corners. And so the center of gravity is shifted out. And we have this outward force onto small contact patches. So surface becomes this really important characteristic for these two road users more than any other. And yeah, the motorcyclists called the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface issues. And the most important parts are on the approach to a curve, through the curve. Once out, it's less important because they're not either braking or on that lean. So we want this consistent, good skid resistant surface. Unfortunately, we see all sorts of surface issues, and you'll be very familiar with them. But depressions can destabilize a rider, so they're sort of almost bouncing and can't keep traction, and their line will be altered. I did a fatality investigation not that long ago, where it was a depression in the road like this in a curve, which destabilized the rider and their pillion passenger, and just sort of bounced them into the oncoming lane, and they were both killed. So identifying those sorts of things, and then of course we've got all of the different surface deficiencies. It's an interesting one. The whole mountain keeps sliding down the hill, and the road gets patched up again. But even roadworks and the debris and mud and things that are dragged out there, we need to start to consider this as part of our road safety audit, that we're not providing a surface that caters for everybody. And we've got some important changes to make. Patching, just thinking about how patches are, where they are. Ideally, we would have full width patching, so that the seams and joints aren't in the riding line exactly where this one is. Yeah, it can be harder. And certainly if you do have pavement failures and the like, really important thing is pre-warning, lots of warning to riders this coming up. This is a popular motorcycle route on a curve, and a rider, if they're coming in here, like they're stuck on their line and their speed, on their line basically. Their real only option is to go the outside of this, or they might pull the bike upright to try to navigate through this, but that's going to force them onto the wrong side of the road anyway. There's really no ability to get to the inside of that for a rider that's got a line and they're traveling. So we need to pre-warn of all that. Yeah, we still do see a lot of service lids or temporary steel plates put on the road network, which are a bit of water on that, it becomes very slippery. Again, you might look at it and you go, well, it's pretty obvious, like motorcyclists are going to see it, aren't they? Well, you need to get your head into scenarios of it's dark, the rider's following behind other vehicles, or cyclists is following behind other vehicles. And so there are scenarios where it may not be as clearly obvious as when you're out there as an auditor looking at it. And so there's skid resistant surfacing and colours, if they absolutely must be there, getting them out of the road is ideal, and bolting them down really well is good. That like bolts are coming up there. You can see there's some different existing permanent surfaces in the road, pit lids. They become problematic. I mean, they're a little bit problematic in there generally. They become extra problematic when you do a resheet, and you've got then a drop down to those, and they raise them, but that's often two completely separate exercises. I've seen the pavement works happen, and then a year later they finally come through to raise up these features, and you're left with a big drop the whole time in between. So if you're auditing a design and they're putting service lids in the pavement in anywhere, that's sort of something you would potentially want to suggest that they move that if they can. And if they're existing, highlighting them and skid resistant surfacing. There's one in Rotorua in a roundabout circulating carriageway. So it's not going to be a good spot for a motorcyclist or a scooter rider or even potentially a cyclist, just because they're likely to be looking around, aren't they, to try to navigate any vehicle that's going to pop into the roundabout on them or these sorts of things. And so maybe not focusing on the surface as much, potentially on a bit of a lean. And so, ideally at the design phase of that roundabout, when they realise that they need to put that an auditor was suggesting that be extended out, that might come with some cost, but it's we're going to have a better scenario. So surface skid resistance, we can use water blasting to improve skid resistance. So you might suggest that if you're concerned with it, or you might use some different surface treatments, and you get well, sorry, I don't have more pictures of surface treatments, but just trying to ensure that we're providing that skid resistance for cyclists and motorcyclists. Now, motorcyclists at curb and curbing is an interesting one. We had a good assignment come in about barrier placement at curbs, but motorcyclists at curbs, certainly this is a point where a rider will be destabilized, and the more mountable the curbing, the better. It doesn't guarantee the rider won't be destabilized, but that gives them a chance if it's a mountable curb or a semi-mountable curb. And where we have to use barrier curbing, we ideally highlight and make sure it's contrasting so the riders can see that. It provides a good delineation as well. But I do have a little video just to, and that was the one that started playing. Now this to me actually is not a bad, I'm going to just change my screen here. This to me is not a bad design, and I think they've actually done really well to highlight the curb here. But I'm more show it just to show you this small lip that manages to destabilize a rider. Like this is a pretty small lip. So let's have a look. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, it might, looks like it might be struggling to stream a bit for some people. Anyway, if you didn't see it, don't worry too much. It's just showing that, pretty small lip, destabilize the rider, they come off, they hit the grab bar, which is a, you use those grab bars to highlight a crossing point, so a cyclist got something to hold on to, and you can see interestingly that held the vehicle. It's pretty strong. I mean, it's a galvanized steel. frangible post as such, but it certainly stops the bike. Okay, line marking, and it was mentioned before, and it's going to get slippery. Thermoplastic line marking, and after a bit of time and a bit of moisture, is going to be very slippery. And we don't want to see large swathes of thermoplastic line marking like this, especially where riders are leaning, need to do hard braking potentially, or evasive maneuvers. So we need line marking, absolutely, and thermoplastic line marking is good, and the like, but just be aware it will be slippery. Now, one thing I can almost guarantee, if you're a road safety auditor and you get into it, and you're doing lots of road safety audits or safe system audits, at some point you'll get a design, and that design will have a large stop sign or a large give way sign painted at an intersection on the pavement as the design. And it basically plays out this way. They've got an intersection, it's got an overshoot crash problem, people keep missing the intersection. They've done some warning signs on the advance, they've done some other things, there's still a bit of that happening. They're thinking, what else can we do? Okay, let's paint a big stop sign here to warn, to give that right at the point that the vehicles will stop. Well, I always have issues with that from a motorcyclist perspective, because they're traveling right in the middle of that, and they too could be subject to this see-through, and they might be late braking because, it's an intersection here, I've got to stop. And you're going to give them a potentially very slippery surface right at the point that they need the most traction, because you've already identified that as an issue. It comes up quite a bit, actually. So just have a think about where line marking is, and try to not have overuse of line marking. It could be slippery. Motorcyclists are quite attuned to signage. We want to get our signage right. We want it to be clear, consistent, correct, and give those messages we want. There are these signs available to particularly highlight a motorcycle hazard if there's one there. That's much more of a hazard for motorcyclists than other road users. They're very effective. They work well. There's been some evaluation of that, and you can use them with supplementary plates as well. Now, ideally, again, you might be thinking, loose stones. Why don't they just sweep the stones off the surface? Well, it might be that there's an unsealed road meeting a sealed road, or there's a gravel quarry or something like that up a side road, so it's continually washing the signs out there. Yeah, so that's what it is. Not a legal warning sign in New Zealand. I think you might find that it is these days, and at least under a accepted for trial use, and there's certainly quite a number of them out there now on different popular motorcycle routes. So it might be something you add to your consideration for use. And just general warning signs, of course, when there are surface deficiencies or others. And finally, strike hazard. Now, this is where I just want to play another video. So let's see if I can get this one going. Hopefully this one frames and streams a little bit better, but if it doesn't, don't worry again, you're going to get an explanation. But when a motorcyclist hits anything out there, the speed and the severity of impact are often quite high. So here's a motorcycle crash test dummy striking a barrier post at 60 kilometers per hour, 25-degree angle. So that's the European European crash test for motorcycle barriers, or barrier protection for motorcyclists. So let's play that. So that is a fatal injury or fatal with the use of underrun protection, that brings it within survivable for riders at the 60 km/h, 25-degree angle hit. So we do have some ability there to do something in some situations to try to address the severity of crashes. And a lot of situations we don't have that control though. Now riders leave the road. I got a graduate to do this at one point, a heap of motorcycle crashes on curves and just plot where they go. Probably kind of obvious, but most of them go to the outside of curve. We've got 21% to the inside of curve. Crashes with passenger vehicles are about a little bit more, closer to 50-50, a little bit more to the outside of curve, but the overcorrection comes into play with passenger vehicles. So they'll go too fast into a curve and then they'll overcorrect as they leave, and we see inside of curve crashes a lot more. But we do see a bit of this sort of stuff out there, and this is the Coromandel area, which is obviously popular motorcycling area there, and we've got surface deficiencies, and we've got outside of curve. We've got these concrete blocks, which I'm not 100% sure what their purpose is. I think for delineation one, but I think it's more for trying to stop vehicles getting to that shared path if they leave the road, but you know, not a great way to do that. So we do have flexible sign ranges available, and for low mount signs usually, and there's lots of different products, and again, you want to find out what's accepted and what's used in your local jurisdiction and the like. I kind of like these ones for a low mount sign. They're a compressed, they're sort of rubber compressed thing that bounces back, and it's pretty friendly. It's very hard when you get to higher signs to cater for the wind load, yet have the frangibility that's within sort of motorcycle tolerance. A galvanized steel post will kill a motorcyclist, no worries. Like it's deemed frangible, but that's for cars. And we see, we've seen some motorcycle deaths and lots of motorcycle deaths and serious injury to signposts. We're working with a couple of universities on trying to get a frangible signpost that can go, above about this height and still stand up to wind load and shear within an acceptable level for motorcyclists. It's actually a bit of a complex engineering challenge, but yeah, it's a bit of fun. Motorcyclists lean as they go around a curve, so any roadside furniture close to the road could be an issue. A truck will definitely take this out before a motorcyclist, I reckon. But there's another one, just a staged photo, this one, just showing a rider sort of leaning close to some of these things. And of course, barriers we talked about. Or I showed you that little video, but barriers are put in place to prevent road users hitting objects, trees, culverts, and the like. And they're designed for passenger vehicles, so riders don't get as much benefit. Now, motorcyclists, sort of two things happen here. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing. When a motorcyclist collides with a barrier system, they half the riders go over the top because they're still on the bike, and the other half of the riders are off the bike, sliding on the ground, and they hit the base of the barrier system. So that's out of some comprehensive evaluations done by the University of New South Wales, who have spent 10 years studying that. And so one of the things we know, and you've already seen a bit of that, is the the idea of a underrun protection. You'll notice I call it underrun protection, not rub rail. Rub rail is a specific type of underrun protection, and this one actually is rub rail. But you can get proprietary products that are available with different proprietary barrier systems. So like Ram Shield has Bicamate, and EasyGuard has MPR, and Century Barrier has, can't remember the name of it, Rider Pro, I think it's called. Anyway, so they're all underrun protection. And so the idea is that, you know, if a rider was sliding and they would hit one of these posts, they would be in serious trouble. If that was there, they would be in less serious trouble. I'm not saying it would be friendly, but they would slide along that. So if you're doing an audit of an area, it's got, you know, it's a popular motorcycle area, or you're concerned about motorcycles leaving the road, hitting the barrier system, you'd be recommending underrun protection for the barrier system. Or if you're at the point, so that's maybe if there's existing barrier systems, you'd be suggesting that retrofit, which is sort of happening here. Or if it's a new barrier system implementation, you might be, you know, factoring that into your consideration of what type of barrier system. And I had that video going, which we won't do. Why do you think it's not? Why do you think it's ended at that point? Anybody got any ideas there? Why has it ended there? Okay, so I think Jubin's saying it's the outside end of the curve. The terminal end is what we were looking for. So maybe we'll give a couple of prizes there, Kez, first people who said terminals. And it is, yeah, it's the end terminal of a barrier system. And again, colleague and I run a 3-day barrier design training course, and we really get into this sort of what is an end terminal, how does it function, you know, what are your design specifics, what type of end terminals are there. There's so much in it, but the message in this is that you can't add anything to those end terminals because it hasn't been tested in the 8 tests you need to do with cars crashing into these at different angles and forward and back to ensure that it's not going to cause issues for a vehicle that leaves the road and hits that. And we don't want it to spear through the vehicle or stop the crumple of this end terminal. They're very specifically designed. So if you see things connected to those, it's a bit of a flag of concern. Now, why road safety barrier and motorcyclists is often a topic of interest. Some motorcyclists still hold on to this impression that this is somehow the most dangerous thing out there for motorcyclists. It's not the case. I mean, a motorcyclist certainly will be in trouble if they hit this at the base. If they hit the wires, actually, they'll go over the top of it. They're not going to get sliced up. But where the motorcycle community probably has, or some people have a reasonable argument, is that there's nothing really good to retrofit to this. But their whole argument is kind of flawed because we don't use this on popular motorcycle routes or areas of motorcycle, and it's predominantly because you can't. In terms of a physical sense, this is a barrier in tension. These are wires that you tension up at the ends of the terminals. You put that on a popular motorcycle touring route like the Coromandel or what is it, Ramatungi Hill? Like, okay. So that's how the road looks from the top. I want to put a barrier in tension on this. What do you think it's going to do? well, it's going to just, the post will just bend and the whole thing pops in, you know, you can't do it. So 200 meter minimum radius, absolute minimum radius for your wire rope on a curve, because it just can't handle it otherwise. So we don't use it on popular motorcycle touring routes. The amount of motorcycle death and serious injury is absolutely minuscule with wire rope systems, just minuscule. There's been like, yeah, I pretty much know every crash that's happened in Australia and New Zealand involving a motorcyclist using a wire rope safety barrier systems, because there's been like 5 ever. Yet there's been just, you know, tens of thousands of motorcycle deaths and serious injuries with other barrier systems, and there's been, you know, another tens of thousands involving hitting signs, hitting culverts, hitting rocks, hitting, you know, anything else that's there. So the whole argument is just it's just ridiculous. It's a waste of everybody's time. But you've got to have a few of those. We have used and trialed, and these post protectors. I mean, this is your rugby goal post padding, essentially around each post. It's not a great solution. I have used it in my designs before, once or twice, but really, between you and I, it was in order to get the barrier through, and it was essentially a PR exercise, and you know, showing which one to do something. If like just basic 101 fundamentals of physics says that this is not going to be a good solution. You're going to try to manage the energy by cushioning it. Like the underrun protection, they roll along it. You're dissipating energy over that distance, as compared to this one, where you're dissipating it over a time, like you're just cushioning it a bit. It works okay when we've got rugby goalposts and the like, because you're kind of at your threshold of energy running into stuff. But this, we're talking about, you know, speeds well beyond that. It do something at some particular crash, but in general, it's not. But that was back in the day when I do those and use those, where we had a choice between a traditional W-beam guard fence or a wire rope safety barrier. There was no flexible W-beam system, right? So what you've got there is you've got a barrier system that is kind of bad. I mean, it does some things, like this is a W-beam, old type B G4 system. And you've got a wire rope system, which is highly flexible and an amazing feature for passenger vehicles. So I do everything I can to get this wire rope system in, because I know how much protection it provides for the bulk of the community. And the motorcyclists were getting angry, but you knew that this is the better facility overall. Nowadays, I would never put these post protectors in, because I would just change the barrier system to a flexible W-beam system with an underrun protection. Safer for motorcyclists, still an absolutely fantastic barrier system for passenger vehicles, and you know, everybody wins. I'm going to keep moving on. There's particular like implementation. Just look at the standard drawings of how these sorts of things go in. I mean, that's just wrong. You don't attach it to the post. You got to separate it out, because you've got these different gaps and sharp bits, and legs and arms can go through these areas. So, and again, thinking about gaps, thinking about what you might be running riders into, but I won't spend long on these. Just finally, speed. Yeah, we can influence rider speed through all of those usual things we can for other road users. Very good in terms of delineation, like where we can provide speed advice around with cams. But remember, they are a fixed hazard for a rider as well on the outside of curves. So you might want to try to be a bit conscious of that. Advisory speeds, regulatory speed limits, and all of the usual things. And there's a sheet in there about motorcycle audits. They're a little bit more unique because not so many road safety auditors are motorcycle riders. So you often engage a motorcycle rider to do the riding for you and talk to the audit team and explain things and ride through and film and the like, and produce the audit report. Well, you do that as a team. I'm going to stop there because I need to get to showing you your assignments, and I'm thinking that's going to take me the last 10 minutes. Any questions you have, pop them in. I might have to get back to you later on that though. Okay, now, Kez, I'm going to jump into the learning management system here and show everybody what they've got to do. Can you see the learning management system there, Kez?
Yep, it's come up for me.
Okay. So we're in module 4, motorcycle cyclists. So your information's there. Road safety audit or safe system audit. There's a few documents in there, some good stuff. There is a safe work method statement agreement here. And what this is you saying, so you've got the safe work method statement there. This is you saying you're going to follow what's in this safe work method statement when you go out to a site near you. Pretty common sense stuff in here. You're not going to go out there intoxicated. You're not going to go out there at night because we're not asking for that in this exercise. You would definitely do that for a real audit, but we're just trying to contain it. We've assessed all the sites. They are low risk in terms of being able to do the site visit there, but it does rely on you being, taking some common sense, and we want you to wear a high-vis vest. So you tick off that. This, it says complete your road safety audit or your safe system audit. There's a little wire rope safety barriers and motorcyclists fact sheet there. You do have a quiz to do as well. Sorry, there's a fair bit to do, but this is the big assignment. Let's click on that. So what you've got in here is the Word document template, okay? That is the number one there, and everybody's going to need that. And I'm just opening it up, and this is what you are going to submit. Okay, it is the New Zealand Safe System Audit report template. You can use this for future ones. But before I'll jump back to this, you'll see here we've got a whole lot of PDF design, and you'll see your name should appear next to one of these. And it should be close to where you gave the address you gave us, either your home or your office, depending on what address you wanted it close to. So let's just pick one at random. Let's just pick, we'll pick this one because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that would be using this design. And okay, you can see there that it is a design. It's actually a real one. Looks like an Auckland Transport design. It shouldn't be built yet. Now, if you happen to get out there and it is built, you do a post-opening road safety audit. But we've tried to make sure it is not built yet. So you're looking at this design and saying, what crashes could happen when they've built it? The reason you're going out to the site is to look at, how does it tie in? How are they going to fit this in? What are the site distance issues here? Will they be able to see? Will pedestrians be able to see? What is the road use? What is the land use? Are these pubs or are these nightclubs? You're thinking about all of that sort of stuff. Okay, you're not going to get all the information you want. You're simply going to get whatever's in the design. You might need to make some assumptions for the exercise. But you're going to look at this. You're going to go to this. You're going to go to the site and you're going to fill it out. Now, there's there's a lot of words existing in here as part of the template. Okay? Anything highlighted in yellow is for you to fill out as part of this assignment. Anything that's crossed out like this, you don't need to fill in. Okay, you don't need to fill in this. So these are actually, in this new process, these are things around the sort of safe system assessment framework that front load a safe system audit. Now, we haven't taken you through the methodology for this. You can have a look at it yourself and get your head around it, or, you know, this is the safe system assessment course covers this. I'm not going to get you to do that. But what we are going to get you, yes?
Oh, sorry, just Anatol's made a point there. Presume we don't do safe system assessment. Should it be a road system assessment? I mean, sorry, yeah. Road safety audit, sorry.
Yeah, so that's what I'm, yep, that's exactly what I'm showing here. We've crossed out the safe system assessment. We've crossed out the safe system assessment part of this because yeah, you haven't been taught that methodology yet. Some of you probably have been to the other course, so you'd be able to do it. But for this assignment, we don't need you to, and we don't want you to, in fact. All you're going to be marked on are 3 findings. So here's an example. Look, example, that's what we want to see. Snip of the design, where you're talking about, maybe a markup, written up, recommendation, safe system supporting treatment, risk rating here, likely, minor, moderate risk, using the risk table. So you have to do that for 3. 1, 2, 3. That is it. Some of you will find 25 issues. We only want 3. Okay. Don't need to write us a conclusion. You just fill this out, and we want you to sign it. And you can be sort of road safety auditor in training, or safe system auditor in training, or whatever you want to put, or you can, or, you know, anything there. But for official audits, you sign them. So we want to practice that. And the last thing we want is a picture of you at your site to prove that you went there. Because that's one of our sort of requirements in this course, is that you go to a site, you look at it, you understand, you know, you're looking at a design, something in the future, and you're looking at the existing road and you're imagining it there, and it's part of the audit process. So then you do all of that, and you go back here, and down here there will be an upload, and you PDF it and upload it, and that's what you want. Now, like this group, if some of these people know each other and they want to do this as a team, we are okay with that. But you absolutely must write that into this where you say, list the audit team members. If we see 2 identical reports and we haven't got those listed there, well, you won't pass. Okay, but you can do that if you want to work with others. So you've got to be safe out there, follow that safe work effort statement, find your design, audit the site, go to the site, take a photo of yourself out there, imagine how it's all going to be built, what are the crashes that are going to happen in the future, not what's the existing failures. Some of those existing failures may continue through to the design, and then you can report those. So, yeah, a lot of wombats today, that's right. So any questions on what you're going to need to do? When's it due? Well, you've got 14 days and 7 hours. We're giving you a bit of time on this. Now, if you're struggling, if you're struggling to find issues in these, or you're struggling to get your head around this, get in contact with us. We can have a one-on-one chat. Get you some time with one of our senior auditors who can explain all of this. But this is the big assignment of the course. Remember, there is a quiz to do as well today. And the final thing again is next session, there is a different link. Okay.
Ken, sorry, I've got an update from Marissa on that.
Yeah.
She's managed to use the same link and changed it from a webinar to a meeting. So it will be the same link, but I'll get her to confirm it with everyone. So yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, so saves that confusion. We're quite, we had some trouble with that. So we will send out an email, but it sounds like you do use the same link, and I got you all worried for nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We've ticked over the time now, so get in contact if you've got any questions. Otherwise, enjoy your auditing.